Welcome to Dittofi. In this video, I will show you how to implement a tags input component. Firstly, we will create a model and backend actions for its implementation, and then we will implement front-end actions that bridge the gap between the backend and the user interface. And then thirdly, we will design the user interface and then move over to build the code and test our tags input component. Finally, we will convert the tags input component to a partial so it can be reused elsewhere around our application. Alright, so the first step in building our tags input component is to set up a data model. And so we're going to try and create a table here. So we'll create an empty table. So a table is a representation of our data model. So this should take less than a minute. All right. Now let's rename the table. Let's call it tags. Press enter. All right. So we need to add an extra column to our table. So that's going to hold the tag itself. So I'm going to call it tag, and then it's going to have data type of single line text, and we need to ensure that there are no null values in our tags, in our tag records. So we need to ensure that it's only text information I saved in our tag records. So we're going to switch this off. We're going to click save. And that's it. We've created our tags data model. All right, so now that we're done with our data model, the next step is to create our first backend action, which we're going to call get tags. So in order to get to the backend actions page, all you need to do is click on this button here, and then you click on new action. So let's call this backend action get tags. Click the enter button, and then we want this backend action to be an endpoint. And so the next step is to create a variable. So a variable is where the response from the endpoint is going to be saved. Now the kind of variable that we want to create is going to be a collection, because we want to have a list of tags from the table. So let's call this response. And then it's going to be the tags model. That's the tags model table that we just created. Then we click on the save button. And then we map the response variable from the endpoints to the variable that we just created in the action. Right? Now that's fine. So now that we're done with this, so let's go ahead and test it. So we click the build code. So this is just going to take less than a minute or two. All right, so now that we've successfully built the code, we're going to test the action. So we can click on the run action button, then click on run. Nice. So we get a success response, that's 200. So for now, we don't have any information in the database, but for the fact that we got 200 success response means that the action is working, has been built and deployed. Our second backend action, and we're going to call it create tag. So this is going to create a new tag in our data model. So we'll click the new action button. So we're going to rename the action, we'll call it create tag, then save. So then we'll add a trigger, we'll call it endpoint. And then we want to pass the tag to this endpoint so we can use it and create a record in our data model. So we'll call it tag name. Put it here as well. Then save. So we're going to add an event. So an event is something that happens, for example, when the endpoint is triggered. So we want a database request to happen, and we want a create database request. So we'll click on the create option. Then we select tags as the model. Then we want to update the tag record. We'll pass the tag name. And then we want to return as new tag. And then we click on save. Then we want to test this code out. So what we'll do is we'll first build the code. So this is going to take like less than a minute or two. Nice, it's done. So we're going to run the action. So let's say something like text 1. So click on run. Try again. So we're going to have to rebuild the code. So this error message is saying that the endpoint hasn't been created yet in the backend. So the solution is simply to rebuild the code and we try again. So text 1, I'll click on run. And good. So we get 200 success response. So let's check our database. So we have our tag right now in our database. All right, so the next step is to create a delete tag back in action. So we want a way to delete the tags that we enter into our table. So what we do is we click on the new action button and let's rename this, call it delete tag. Click the enter button and to save the backend action. Then we trigger an endpoint. And now, so we want to delete a particular record from the table. So what we need to do is to create a model, a variable. So let's call it response tags. Before that, so we want to pass the ID. We want to pass the ID of the tag we want to delete. So the ID is a unique identifier for each row in the table. And then we want to create a response variable. So when the tag is deleted, it's going to be stored in a variable. And the variable has to look like a particular row in our data model. So that's why we use the model kind. And so we'll call it the name of the variable, we'll call it response. Then the tags. So we want to delete a tag where the ID of the row is equals to the ID that we pass to the endpoint. So the ID that we pass to the endpoint is what we created in the query variable section. Then, so in order to perform the database request, we need to select the delete option. And then we need to choose what we want to delete the entire model. So what we're saying is we want to delete the entire row in the data model. And then we click save. And click save. And don't forget to build your code afterwards. All right. So the next step is to move over to the front-end facing side of the application. And we're going to focus on creating front-end actions. So front-end actions are event-like patterns that are triggered, based on when the user interacts with the user interface. So when the user interacts with the elements on the screen, they can sometimes trigger front-end actions. So we're going to create two front-end actions. Create tag and remove tag. So the create tag is triggered when the user submits the form, and so let's create that now. So we click on front-end actions tab, and then we click on new front-end action. So let's call it create tag. All right, so we're gonna add an event. Now when the user tries to submit the form, we want to trigger the backend action that we created. So we want to call the endpoint and the backend action to create a new tag. So the endpoint create tag. Let's create tag response. Variable tag name. So I think the first step is, so we need to create a tag name variable. So come here. So when the user types on the text input that we're going to create shortly, the text is going to be saved in this variable called tag name. So we want the text saved in the variable to be passed to the front-end action. Create tag. And hit save. All right, so we want to know whether the call was successful. So we use a conditional statement for that. So we want to know whether the call was successful. So we're going to create a variable, success code number. So we want to check if it was successful. So if it's successful, like if you remember when we talked about this in the backend action, so a successful call to an endpoint, we check if it's equal to 200, and so that's what we're doing here. Then we click on the save button, and then if it's successful, we want to do something. We want to call an endpoint which is called get users. So we're going to use the refresh endpoint to call the get tags, sorry. Yeah. And then we want to ensure that when the user is typing the tag name in the text input, once he's done, the text is removed from the tag name variable. So in order to do this, we're going to create a new variable called empty string, and we'll give it an empty value. So we just added a space, and we save it. And then we're going to use the set field event type to set the tag name, which consists of the user's text inputs, and then we're going to empty it. Click save. So in order to recap, so we're going to first run the endpoint when the user clicks on the enter button in the front end, and then once we're going to check if it's successful in the conditional statements, and then we're going to call the get tags endpoint so that the user can see the new tag he entered, and then we're going to update the tag name variable to an empty string so that once user is done typing, the text field is emptied. Alright, so we're going to create the next front-end action, which is to delete a tag. So we want an action to be triggered when the user clicks on the tag button to delete. And so what we're going to do is, so we're going to commence creating the delete tag endpoint. Sorry, front-end action. So it's going to be delete tag. So we need to pass the identifier to this front-end action so that we can use the identifier to delete the particular record in the database table. So we'll call it tag ID. It's going to be a number. Here we save. Alright, so we're going to add an event. So we're going to run an endpoint. The endpoint to run is delete tag endpoint. Let's call it delete tag code. Then we have to pass the variable tag ID that we're going to pass to this endpoint from the front end. I'm going to show you how to pass it later. And we'll click on save. Now we want to know whether the endpoint call is successful. So we're going to need a conditional statement for that. So condition. So check if it's equal to 200, the response. So we're going to create a success code. Number 200. Click on save. So check if it's equal to 200. Then we click on save. Now if it's equal to 200, we want to call the get tags endpoint one more time so that the user can see the latest tags on the screen and can know what's happening. So we'll call the get tags endpoint, and that's it. Alright, so the next move is to place HTML element on the screen, and we're going to link the HTML elements to front-end actions. So the first element we're going to place on the screen is the form block. So we're going to drag this onto the screen, and we're going to remove some of the elements. Yeah, so we'll keep the text input, and then we're gonna make a flex, and then we're gonna add a div onto the screen as well. We're gonna place it inside the form, inside the form group. Inside. All right. So then we'll remove this. Let's remove this from here. Paste inside the form. All right. Okay. Then we're going to make the form elements a flexbox. So the reason why is so that we can have the div and the text input side by side. So we use the dflex class of the Bootstrap library. Right. So now we have this and we have this. Then we're going to add some padding or some margin to the div. So let's use the me2 class. So there's going to be a space, and then we're going to make it alright. So we're going to try and add a span inside this. So we already made this the inline flex. I'm going to add a span. then we're going to also add an icon inside the div block. Okay. So we're gonna copy it. So I'm going to click on Ctrl C and then paste it inside the div block. Right. So then we'll delete this one. Okay. Remove the white space. Make sure it doesn't wrap. Text no wrap. Right. And then we want all the elements to be aligned centrally. So use the align items center. Right. Then we add some spacing to the span, so that you would like an ME1 to the end. Let's give the button a color, or the div a color. So let's give it like BG primary. So BG primary gives like a purple color, and then the text white. All right. So we're going to change the icon to an X. So it's going to be the close. And then I'm going to add some padding. PX2 to make it look good. And then now we're going to link our HTML elements to front-end actions. So we want this div block, which is going to be our tag. We want this tag to be repeatable. But first of all, let's make it rounded. Yeah. So we want it to be repeatable. So what we can do is we go here, we go to the cog, and we click on repeating width. Then we find the backend action that we created, get tags. So we attach it. So what this is going to do is that whenever the user comes to this page, it's going to call the backend action to get the tags. And whenever a tag is added, we're going to see it repeat. And now we're going to have to, for each row in the table that is being repeated, we're going to attach each column or each record in the row to the repeating div. So we're going to click on the span. For example, we want to make it the tag text. So we're going to use the row. I'm going to call it add tag to it. And then once the user clicks on the tag, we want the tag to disappear. So we're going to add the delete action, front-end action that we created earlier. So we'll add it on click. We'll pick an action, delete tag, and then we attach the ID, because that's what's required to it. And then we attach the text input to the tag name variable that we created, so that when the user clicks on the enter button, the tag name, whatever is in the tag name, will now be saved as a tag. So we're going to click on the text input. We're going to come here. We're going to bind the variable tag name to it, right? And now when the user clicks on the enter button, automatically creates a tag. So we're going to click on the form element, and then we're going to add a front-end action on submit, and then we're going to click on create tag, and that's about it. And then we're going to view the code and test it out. Cool. All right, so now that we've built the code, we now click on the preview button to view the code, to view what we've done. And now, so what we have here, so we can just type hello, click the enter button, and then we see it here. And then we can type world, we see there. And then clicking on this removes it. And removes it. Yep. Alright, so the final step is to show you how to convert what we've built into a partial. A partial is a component that can be used everywhere. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the form element, and then we're going to click create partial, and then we can also rename the partial, call it tag component, and we can click save. Right, and then we can just drag this anywhere else.